But first, I would like to ask you, like, how did you ended up here? And how you ended up from, I assume, from China to LA, and then in the processing foundation, running this community online.
Yeah, thanks for the question. My name is Qianqian. You can call me Q, the first letter of my name. My pronouns are they, she, or any respectful pronouns. I'm currently based in Tomorrowland, also known as Los Angeles, California. I was born and raised in China, and I studied architecture in China. Then I came to United States in around 2012 for my grad school. I feel when I was in architecture school, I always feel like a misfit or like a outsider because when I was at school, I realized what I was most interested in was not the space itself, but more like the people in the space. I always very interested in how people interact with each other or interact with the space. And I always felt like human or people are the part that interests me the most. I worked in China and in Denmark for a while, and then I moved to San Francisco in 2015. Being immersed in Silicon Valley tech culture, I find myself just surrounded by people who make work with technology. So the very natural thing for someone who studied architecture to do at that moment was to do stuff in VR, because I was doing a lot of designing and creating in the architecture world already, but it's in California, it takes forever to get one thing built. There's so many rules and code. So I started to make little things in VR around 2016. And then I realized I started to make things in Unity. Then I realized I need to learn C Sharp. That was very challenging language for me to get started at the moment. Then my partner Harvey introduced me to processing and slowly to P5. Then that P5 was the language that taught me how to code. Back in back at college, I think we had a class about Visual Basic. That's my only interaction with programming back then, but I never thought about using that for my own creation. And I felt it took me a while to realize that I was making art because I felt very comfortable to call myself designer. With architecture training, I'm like, oh, I'm solving problems. I'm like using design to solving some world problems. I did my thesis project in a world's biggest landfill in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. I went there to do a field visit. It left me with so many feelings because it was in a favela area and like you can just see people there trying to make a living in this landfill. Um, but I initially thought, okay, I'm going to use my grad school thesis project to try to solve some problems for the landfill. But in the end, I felt like it was such a naive idea. Like for a lot of problems, like it's so little architect or landscape architect can do at the moment. But I always feel like I thought about that place I went often. And that's like some of my feelings. And then I slowly transitioned out of like the architecture industry. I was like spent a year trying to figure out like what I want to do with architecture or with like technology or with art. And I think it was until around like 2018 or something. I remember that was a Thanksgiving break, and I spent the entire Thanksgiving break trying to make it work. It's a robotic hand that will hold my own hands. I remember that entire break, I didn't go out. I was just trying to figure out how I can make a robotic hand to hold my own hands. And then, of course, I went to see my friend for the dinner, and some of my friends were asking me like, "Oh, what do you want to do with that robotic hand? Are you going to sell it? Are you gonna make that to a product?" And I was like, "No, I just need to make it." And that was the moment I realized, "Whoops, I'm actually making art." Because before that, even though a lot of my friends were telling me, "Oh, you're making art," I don't believe them. I'm like, I felt like for me, come from a background that I felt maybe like less privileged background. I always feel like making art is not something I'm allowed to do. Like I always feel like I need to do something that can make me living. So making art was on my top list. So it really came later in my life that I realized I didn't choose that, but the work that I want to do actually caught me. So I was really appreciate that artist awakening moment, and I was like, okay, now I finally allow myself to call myself artist. Because before that, I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm an artist. I'm a designer. So I would say I finally try to feel comfortable to add title artist for myself. So that kind of happened not many years ago.